Today, there are men who never ran for office, never commanded a single soldier, and never appeared on a ballot. But they changed the world more than most presidents ever did. Henry Kissinger was one of them. And in a single decade, the 1970s, he made a series of deals that still control your life right now. Your gas prices, your grocery bill, the reason the dollar in your wallet is worth anything at all. Most Americans have no idea those deals were ever made. But history has a way of catching up, because every system built behind closed doors eventually cracks open. So what did Kissinger actually do? And what did America gain and lose forever? Let's start with the man himself. Henry Kissinger was born in Germany in 1923, a Jewish refugee who fled the Nazis as a teenager and arrived in America with almost nothing. By the time he was 50, he was arguably the most powerful unelected man on the planet. He served as National Security Advisor and Secretary of State simultaneously, a combination no one has held before or since. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1973. His co-recipient refused to accept it in protest. The two Nobel Committee members resigned over it. That gives you a sense of who we're dealing with. Some call him the architect of modern American foreign policy. Others call him a war criminal responsible for hundreds of thousands of civilian deaths in Vietnam, Cambodia, Chile, and Bangladesh. But here's the thing. Both groups are probably right, because Kissinger didn't operate in the world of good and evil. He operated in the world of leverage. He believed in something called realpolitik, the idea that nations don't have permanent friends or permanent enemies, only permanent interests, and he was willing to do whatever it took to protect those interests. That philosophy led to 3 deals that reshaped the world. The first was with an enemy, the second was with a king, and the third, most people still don't know happened. It's July 1971. The United States and China haven't spoken in 22 years. There are no diplomatic relations, no embassies, no phone lines, nothing. These two countries are essentially strangers, hostile strangers, with nuclear weapons pointed at each other. China had conducted its first nuclear test in 1964. By 1971, they had enough warheads to level multiple American cities. So Kissinger does something no American official had done in over 2 decades. He gets on a plane to Beijing. Officially, he's visiting Pakistan. He even stages a fake illness so the press doesn't follow him. He disappears for 48 hours. What happens in those 48 hours? He sits across from Zhou Enlai, China's premier, and they talk for 13 hours straight. Not about nuclear weapons, not about Taiwan. They talk about philosophy, about history, about the nature of power, about what both countries actually need. Kissinger understood something critical. You don't make a deal by listing demands. You make a deal by understanding what the other side is afraid of. And China was afraid of the Soviet Union. The USSR and China had actually fought a border war in 1969. Nearly 800 soldiers died. The two communist giants were on the verge of all-out war. Kissinger's offer was simple. America stops treating China as the enemy, and in return, China stops backing North Vietnam and Soviet expansion in Asia. Nixon flew to Beijing in February 1972. The handshake was broadcast live on American television. People cried. Nobody could believe it. It was called the week that changed the world. So what did it actually cost? Taiwan. Not officially, not in writing, but in practice, America agreed to slowly distance itself from Taiwan's claim to be the legitimate government of all of China. A decision that is still creating crises today, 50 years later. The deal worked brilliantly in the short term. It split the communist bloc. It gave America breathing room to exit Vietnam. It opened one of the largest consumer markets in human history to American business. But it also gave China the international legitimacy it needed to begin its rise to the power it is today. Kissinger bought time. America paid for it later. Now here's the deal that most people have never heard of, but that controls your life more than almost anything else. It's 1973. America is in chaos. OPEC, the oil cartel, had just launched an embargo against the United States. Gas prices quadrupled almost overnight. Lines at gas stations stretched for miles. Some stations ran completely dry. The American economy, the most powerful in the world, was being strangled by countries sitting on oil. And here's the deeper problem. Since 1971, the dollar was no longer backed by gold. Nixon had ended the gold standard, which meant the dollar's value was now based on trust. Nothing but trust. Other countries were starting to wonder, why should we hold American dollars if they're not backed by anything? If that trust collapsed, the dollar collapses. And if the dollar collapses, America loses everything. Kissinger flew to Riyadh. The deal he made with King Faisal of Saudi Arabia was breathtakingly simple. Here's how it worked. America would guarantee the military defense of the Saudi royal family, protection from any threat, external invasion, internal coup, anything. In return, Saudi Arabia would do two things. First, sell oil exclusively in US dollars. Not pounds, not francs, not gold. Dollars only. Second, take the billions of dollars they earn from oil sales and invest them back into American Treasury bonds, funding the US government. Saudi Arabia agreed, and then used its influence inside OPEC to get the other major oil producers to agree too. Within 2 years, virtually all global oil was priced and sold in US dollars. Every country on Earth that wanted oil, which was every country on Earth, now had to hold dollars to buy it. Think about what that means. Demand for the dollar became permanent, global, structural. Not because people trusted America, because they needed oil. This is what gave America the ability to run deficits that would bankrupt any other country. This is why the U.S. national debt can be $30 trillion and the economy still functions. When the whole world needs your currency, you can print more of it without destroying its value the way other countries would. French President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing had a name for it. He called it America's exorbitant privilege, and he meant it as an insult. Now here's what Kissinger never talked about publicly. The price of that deal was a 50-year military commitment to one of the most repressive governments on earth. Saudi Arabia has no elections. Women weren't allowed to drive until 2018. Political dissidents are imprisoned, tortured, and executed. Journalists are murdered. America knew all of this and protected the regime anyway, because the petrodollar depended on it. And here's the part that should make your blood run cold. 15 of the 19 hijackers on September 11th, 2001 were Saudi citizens. The ideology that motivated them was funded and spread by Saudi Arabia for decades. The deal Kissinger made didn't just have an economic cost. It had a body count. The China deal and the petrodollar deal, you can at least argue those were in America's strategic interest. But Kissinger made a third kind of deal, and this one is harder to justify. September 11th, 1973. Not 2001, 1973. Chile. Salvador Allende was the democratically elected president of Chile. He was a socialist. He had nationalized copper mines, many of them owned by American companies like Anaconda and Kennecott. Washington didn't like that. Kissinger was famously dismissive. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, "I don't see why we need to stand by and watch a country go communist due to the irresponsibility of its own people." So they didn't stand by. The CIA, under Kissinger's direction, spent at least $8 million in 1970s money to destabilize the Chilean economy and support opposition groups. On September 11, 1973, Chilean General Augusto Pinochet launched a coup. Allende died in the presidential palace, officially by suicide, though many dispute this. Pinochet took power. Over the next 17 years, Pinochet's regime tortured over 40,000 people. At least 3,200 were killed or disappeared. Kissinger's response when he was told about the coup's success was reported to be good. His reasoning, Chile going communist would have been a domino that toppled the rest of Latin America toward the Soviet Union. Maybe he was right strategically. Maybe he wasn't. But here's the pattern. Kissinger's deals always had winners and losers. And the losers were almost never American. That's what realpolitik looks like up close. Kissinger died in November 2023. He was 100 years old. Almost till the end, he was meeting with world leaders and writing about geopolitics. But the system he built, it's under pressure in ways he probably didn't predict. Let's start with the petrodollar. In 2023, Saudi Arabia and China struck a deal to trade oil in Chinese yuan. Not dollars, yuan. It sounds like a footnote. It's not. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the BRICS countries, have openly discussed creating an alternative reserve currency to replace the dollar in international trade. In 2023, their combined GDP surpassed the G7 for the first time. In 2000, about 70% of global foreign exchange reserves were held in US dollars. By 2023, that number had dropped to around 58%, and it's still falling. That's not a collapse. Not yet, but it's a direction. And the China deal is fraying too. The assumption was that economic integration would make China a stakeholder in the American-led world order. It didn't work that way. China used access to Western markets, Western technology, and Western investment to build a rival power, one that now challenges American dominance in manufacturing, AI, semiconductors, and military capability in the Pacific. Kissinger saw this coming, actually. In his last book, published just months before he died, he warned that the US and China were on the edge of a confrontation more dangerous than anything in the Cold War. The man who opened the door spent his last years warning about what had walked through it. So what do all of Kissinger's deals have in common? Is there a pattern? Absolutely. Here's the formula. Short-term gain, long-term liability. The China deal ended American isolation, but created a rival superpower. The petrodollar stabilized the dollar, but chained America to Saudi Arabia for half a century. The Chile deal stopped one socialist government, but cost America's moral credibility across Latin America for a generation. Every deal bought something real, and every deal left a bill unpaid. Power prefers systems over principles. Kissinger never asked whether something was right. He asked whether it worked, and in the short term, it usually did. But systems built purely on self-interest have no immune system against their own corruption. They can't distinguish between a necessary compromise and a catastrophic one. They just make deals. The people making the deals are never the ones paying for them. The deals he made were paid for by people who had no seat at the table. That's not unique to Kissinger. That's the nature of power. But it's worth remembering every time someone tells you a hard choice was necessary. Necessary for whom? Every system built in secret eventually becomes visible. The petrodollar was never voted on. The China opening was kept hidden until the last possible moment. The Chile operation was classified for decades. But secrecy doesn't last. It just delays the reckoning. And right now in 2024, the reckoning for Kissinger's world is arriving. The petrodollar is losing ground. China is a peer competitor. The alliances he built are fraying. The world he designed is being renegotiated. The question is, who's doing the negotiating this time? Kissinger once said, "A statesman must choose between the moral and the necessary, knowing he can never be certain which is which." That's either wisdom or a very elegant excuse. Maybe both. What's certain is this: the deals made in secret by people you never elected are still shaping the price of everything you buy, the wars your children might fight, and the currency in your wallet. That's not a conspiracy. That's just how power works. If this changed how you see the world, the next video on your screen right now will finish the picture.